Ari, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a little bit of a back and forth, but here we are and the joys of podcasting, right? So we made it work, but lots of interesting things to talk through today. And part of it is your story. Obviously, the whole notion around storytelling is something that I definitely rely on. And I think there's an aspect of storytelling that's stuck with us throughout history that keeps people coming back. There's something about the story itself, the narrative, that people tend to, I guess, get drawn to. So
Yes.
that is something I do want to explore. But before we get into our conversation, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what's brought you here today.
Yeah. I'm not sure I know who I am. That's a difficult question. I think we're all on the journey to discover that.
Yep.
The best way to describe me is a mutt, right? It's that dog that's just a mix of all the dogs. You don't really know what breed they are. I was in the military. I sold multiple companies, some of them gracefully, meaning not so good, but some of them incredible success. Started my first company when I was 8, sold my first company when I was 15, and thought that startups are easy because if you do it when you're 15, they must be. Got slapped in my face, kicked in my ass many times, figured out that it's not easy, failed not so gracefully quite a few
Mhm.
times, learned some hard lessons. Being a corporate guy for 8 years with Siemens. It was a startup, got sold to Mentor Graphics, became 2,500 employees, became 250,000 employees. I was born in South Africa. I lived in Israel for many years. I'm a US citizen nowadays, but I was born in South Africa. So
Yeah.
I honestly don't know what I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. And it's interesting times right now. And obviously, like I'm in Canada, your country, United States, going through a lot of things this week. But at the root of it, you could say there's the society we're living in right now, so fragmented, so
Yes.
divided, a lot of polarizing things happening.
Yes.
And when you and I chatted previously, we talked about why storytelling can bring us together.
Yes.
So, do you think at a time like this, it's even more important to
Oh,
be having conversations like this and finding points of commonality? I think what one of my frustrations has been that, and it's part of social psychology in general, but
yes.
if we have the in-group, out-group dynamics, immediately we start looking at our differences
Yes.
rather than finding those commonalities. But do want to get your thoughts, especially in
Yeah.
some parts of the world you lived in. I'm sure
Yes.
you have appreciated a bit more
Yeah.
given your background as well.
Yeah. But, Lord. First of all, I'll say that I'm only an amateur social psychologist, meaning that I have no training or I just read on my own time. Product managers, which is one of my professions, tend to, the good ones at least, I'll say, although that's a little self-congratulatory, they tend to research a lot of social psychology because it's a really helpful. But the problem with that is when you start understanding social psychology, it shows your own biases, your own bad decisions, how you fail as a human being. It gets scary if you go too deep
Mm,
because you start to undermine how am I making this decision? That converts into decision making theory. And then you're really second guessing everything you do. Like, why am I making this decision? So it's a scary journey. And any journey of self awareness is a scary one, I would say. But so I'll just say that I'm not a professional, but I do have my own personal story to share. And I've gone through this really violent turmoil.
mm,
Growing up, during the first Gulf War, I ran to the bomb shelters. Why was I running to the bomb shelters? I don't know. There was a war between America and Iraq. It had nothing to do with me, supposedly. I still had to run to the bomb shelters. That was a weird experience. I made friends throughout my life with people that were very different from me. I went to the middle of the Brazilian forest. There's a little place there called Manaus. Turns out when rubber stopped to be a thing there because they didn't no longer need the chemicals to manufacture rubber,
mhm,
they decided to make it a tax-free zone to basically support the local economy. So electronics manufacturing popped in, and hence Siemens became a thing in Manaus. So I've met people that could not be more different than me, but I feel like this guy's my brother. Like, I feel like we have so much in common, and yet he's on the other side of the world, the 20+ hour flight, different culture, different language, looks different than me. And yet this guy's my brother and has been for a long time since we met. So I think there's some confusion in my mind. Like, how can we be so similar And yet, how can we be so different at the same time?
Mm.
And I don't have good answers, but I feel like I can go across the world, and I have the exact same example with a friend, a brother in China, Wesley. And I feel he's like incredibly close to me. We think as like the same person, like a brother. And yet sometimes my neighbors here in the States, it's two different worlds.
Yeah.
And that's confusing because I have that commonality. I have the geography commonality. I have the
Right.
culture commonality. I have a lot of things in common. So it's really difficult. But so I don't have good answers, but that's the backdrop to my story and how I think about this.
Mm.
And I don't know if it's true that today we're more divided than ever, because I think about history, and recently I've become a history buff. I thought history was stupid when I was young, and 2 years ago I figured out that it wasn't stupid, which is a really late age to learn an important lesson.
Yeah.
So I started to study history, and I think it's incredible. And I asked myself, are we really more divided than ever? Or is this just a pendulum that swings to the left and the right? I happen to be on an extreme swing of the pendulum right now. It's going to adjust, but I don't know how more it's going to swing to that extreme. So that kind of scares me.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that when you review history, that what we're experiencing right now is nothing new. It's just our problems tend to evolve. Right now, we're in that technology revolution, right? So that's where I think it's right in our faces and we have access to more information. But yeah, I believe his name's James Holland. He's a historian. He said something that really stuck with me. He said, it's not that history repeats itself, it's human behavior
I
repeats.
love that.
And that's
Brilliant.
what we're seeing right now.
Brilliant.
It's just a repetition, people just not seeing the truth for what it needs to be. And everyone's version of the truth is different too. And that's where I think a lot of the complexity comes in.
Yeah. I think the beauty is that though Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, they started to disentangle the reasons why we don't see the truth, or why we see the truth and yet ignore it, or why we tend to believe that the truth that happened 5 minutes ago is more powerful than the truth that happened 10 years ago. I found the book transformative because it started to show me why my brain doesn't work properly. I think that history, yes, is powerful, but we even misinterpret history based on our own biases and perceptions. So it just, humans are messed up at the end of the day. When you think about how the brain works, it's not really how the brain works. It's the model of the brain one and brain two. But it's incredibly interesting. And when I look at history, I think what's exciting and terrifying about technology is technology. I had two psychologists on the call on the podcast yesterday, and one of them was quite upset that a different guest of mine described AI as a tool. And it's just a tool. It's just a hammer. You can build a house. You can smash somebody in the head. He didn't like that description of the tool because he felt like it was a very dangerous tool and that it could be abused by powers. And when I think about technology over 1,000 years, right? And I think about, let's say, advocates for good, right? Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, like Gandhi, right? These amazing people that have changed history. If you had to quantify the value that Gandhi has provided, it's really difficult. Like, how much value did Martin Luther King create? It's hard to calculate that in a number. But what is really easy to calculate is how much value the printed press created, how much value the wheel created, how much value the AI might create 10 years in the future. We'll look back and we'll say, oh my God, how much value did this create? But on the other hand, it also scares me, it terrifies me, because how much value did the atomic bomb take away? Now that's technology. So technology has been the most powerful force in the history of mankind to change, both for good and for bad. So I look at AI and I'm like, is this the wheel? Is this the printed press? Is this freedom of speech? Or is this an atomic bomb? I don't quite know yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things time will tell. But I also think personally, and maybe at times it could be a naive view, but what we see in the world is what we put out, right? The perspective we have is a reflection of how we feel, not only about ourselves, but things in general. And I believe that from a psychological perspective too, I see that in the clients I work with, is that shift in perspective sometimes can just change your whole outlook.
Brilliant.
And how you feel, right? And I think that's where if people are approaching AI with fear, that's what they're going to get. And then if they approach it as a tool that can benefit you at times or can be a complement, then that's what you're going to see.
Yeah. I'll play the devil's advocate. I am naturally an optimistic person, so I tend to subscribe to your side of the wall.
Yeah.
But as a University of Chicago graduate, I always play the devil's advocate. So I'll do that for a moment. The problem is that there is evil in this world.
Yes.
I'm not a particularly religious person, but I've seen some things that make me wonder if the devil exists, and therefore does God exist? So gone down the philosophical route. But I see organized crime, I see sex labor, child trafficking for sex labor, which is a horrific combination. And I talk to guests who tell me about it. And I'm like, this is evil. This is true, pure, unadulterated evil. And like, why are we ignoring it? And these people that are fighting this evil on a daily basis are frustrated that why can this continue to happen? Like, how are we letting, and there's still slavery in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not slavery, oh, I'm being oppressed with your words. Slavery as in I was sold for $350 on an app on a phone.
Yeah.
Like, how is that not a news item? And then people are dying in Africa and nobody gives a shit. So, and wars are going on that nobody can name them. So there's all this injustice in the world, and what's happening? And nobody knows about it. Nobody knows about it. So I'm asking myself, does anybody care?
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of it, and I do agree with you. I absolutely believe there is evil in the world, but I think personally that we can overcome that evil if we approach it with good, right? So its force is limited in my view. But yeah, I think part of your question around what's going on, why are we not talking about these things? I think part of it, it's funny, I was exploring this morning, I was thinking about it too, is my understanding or perspective is, first of all, we've become normalized to it because it's going all around us. So then it's that whole frog in the boiling water analogy, right? The temperature's been turned up and we just seem to normalize it. The other piece is, I think, and this is where you can make the case for conspiracy theories, but some of it is by design too, right? Where there's so many distractions. And I think a lot of people say that COVID, the pandemic, was a bit of a distraction to keep people focused on something else. Meanwhile, there's other things going on in the background. Now, I don't know if you subscribe to that, but I think there's many factors at play here, right?
Let's take the tinfoil hat off and let's talk about the art of war. So in the art of war, countries, powers, they do in fact use misinformation, disinformation as part of the art of war. So when a country says something or a politician says something, is that the truth? Of course not. They're sending out a message to their allies and to their enemies. You can put on the tinfoil hat and say that, oh, the government has probes up my ass or whatever. Okay, no. But to say that the government always tells the truth, of course not. No, that if they would always tell the truth, they would disadvantage themselves through the art of war. That's not something they should do. And in fact, even if you take this to computer science and talk about game theory, you should not always tell the truth. You should sometimes bluff and sometimes not bluff. And there's like advanced computer science research about when you should bluff, when you shouldn't bluff, and how to keep it fresh. If you look at it through that lens, is it plausible that governments are pulling shit in order to take a strategic tactical advantage? Absolutely. Is it plausible that politicians are corrupt? No, no politician is corrupt. No politician would make a decision to protect themselves. I know that I can point to a country in the Middle East, which I think the politician is extremely corrupt, been in government for way too long, and should be put out of there. And I wish that they had our American standard of 8 years, because that constrains power. So without getting partisan, are people corrupt? Yes. People are human, therefore corrupt.
Yes.
Are people flawed? Yes. When a flaw crosses a certain line in the sand, it becomes corruption. When it becomes corruption, I think you don't have to be tinfoil hat, right? The government is putting probes in my water and I'm drinking them. That's too far.
Right.
But this idea of misinformation, disinformation is happening frequently. Absolutely. Like, I hear Trump talking, or Biden, or one of my favorite presidents was on one side of the aisle, but he did a lot of stuff on the other side of the aisle. So I thought it was brilliant because he was playing both games at the same time. I won't mention names because I don't want to be partisan, but I think he was one of the most brilliant presidents ever. He did a lot of good and probably a few mistakes as well. But that ability, and then he says something like, oh, he's saying this, but why is he saying this?
Mm.
So I had to think deeply. And even after thinking deeply, I'm like, there's 3 or 4 reasons I don't really know. So it's complicated, and we should not oversimplify not the word in the Bible and not the words of a person to be like, oh, he said it, he means exactly that.
Mm.
That seems to me to be just naive way to look at the world.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you were talking about the flawed human, and again, talk historically, it's always been there, right? People
Yes.
come into power and then they want more of it, and they sometimes fall into taking advantage of that power. And it's like the whole story of Icarus, right? Getting too close to the sun, and then that's part of the problem, right? So how do you keep yourself humble? So coming back to
Yes.
storytelling, how does that then bring us together throughout time, but especially right now where, to your point, which I agree with, the
Yeah.
pendulum swinging so far, how do you find that balance and bring order into the world in a way?
Yeah. So I diminished at the beginning of my talk the Martin Luther Kings and Mother Teresa's of the world for technology. The reason that I did that is because it's easy to quantify the dollar value. But the truth is that just because something is not easy to quantify doesn't mean it has a massive impact that we can't even understand. And actually, when you think about the Martin Luther Kings and the Mother Teresa's and the Gandhis, they are the essence of the story. They are the thing that puts truth in our hearts that leads us to be better people. How do you quantify that? Impossible. Does
Mm.
that mean it doesn't have value? Does it have value? Of course it does. So I think we need another Martin Luther King right now in this world. And I think he or she might be out there right now figuring out who they are. And the art of influence, the art of, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King is sharing stories, right? You
Mm.
get up on that soapbox and you capture the minds and the hearts, more importantly, of the people. And that's done through narrative, that's done through storytelling. So I don't know who this person will be, but I feel like the hour is right and it's right now. And I think we need to be brought back to a sense of reason that, and again, I don't want to become political, so I'm going to censor a lot of what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but certain things need to be said to align us as a nation, both in the United States and align us as a global humanity, right? Throughout everywhere. Now,
Mm.
we won't be able to convince some people because they're just going to be out for power and they're corrupted and it's unfixable, right? True evil does exist. But I think the reason that I think, again, I'm an optimist like yourself. I think evil will at the end consume itself, but a new evil comes along to fill the gaps, and God help
Yes.
us there. But I think the side of good in this fight, it needs to be honest. It needs to adhere to the rules. It needs to have an ethical compass because if it doesn't, it just falls by the sideways as evil does and something else comes to replace it. So the only thing that lasts over time, I think, is this honesty and accountability of oneself, both at the personal level and at the government level.
Yes.
And I think we have work to do is all I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you're saying, maybe we need someone like Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa or Gandhi. Do you think it's one person, or could it be a group of people that step up in
Oh
different parts
wow.
of the world?
Oh wow. That's brilliant. I don't know. That's such a good question. I think that's a really good question. If it's different people, are they following one narrative? If they're following one narrative, is there a leader who proposed that narrative?
Hmm.
Then by de facto, does that leader become the one voice?
Mm.
So that's my first hypothesis
Yeah.
is does that human structure, is it inherently flawed?
Yeah.
If it isn't, then it's a coalition.
Right.
If that coalition can exist, then does the coalition have equal power? So when we look at structures of power in the world, they don't have equal power. So it's
Yes.
based your GDP and other stuff like that, and your spend into weapons and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But if we go outside of government, I don't know. It's a wonderful question. I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah. And I would think the other piece is, I know you're asking what would the narrative be, but what if the narrative already exists and we just need to follow it? And I think that's my view. And the reason why I asked that question is because sometimes we lose sight of the agency we all have as
Yes.
individuals, and we can do something within our communities
Yes.
rather than waiting for one person or someone else to step in.
Oh, okay, okay. You're arguing grassroots. I got you.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Oh, absolutely. Okay, now I follow you. It took me a minute to catch up.
Yeah.
Um, Absolutely. No, absolutely. Your message is that of grassroots. And when we say grassroots, what does that mean? Is that each of us have agency. What does that mean? Each of us have free will.
Yes.
Now, if we didn't have free will, we'll be slaves to divine power. So we have to have free will. The power of free will is that we make mistakes and we become corrupt. So we have free will. We have the ability to make choices. What are those choices? If we make choices that are good, what are they? And sometimes it's speaking up. If you become an American citizen, you swear on certain values. Those values are contributing to your society. That means writing a letter to your congressman. That means writing to a newspaper. That means voicing yourself in freedom of speech. So absolutely, there is so much that we can do. I think that the power of your podcast and aspiringly my own is to remind, and I apologize for guessing what one of the objectives of your podcast is, but I would say maybe, tell me if I'm right here, is to remind humanity that they do, in fact, have agency and free will and the ability to do good in the world. And if we took a moment to reflect on that, then maybe more of it would happen. Oh, absolutely. Now that I understand your point, I couldn't agree more. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm here. And maybe that's why you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at it that way for sure. And yeah, the message for the podcast is definitely agency. And at the fundamental level, yes, to create good, but often it's also even helping people realize at the core of it, it's focused on mental health, but you can easily expand beyond that.
Brilliant.
Once you've been able to solve your own problems, then how can you start solving bigger problems?
Agency is one of many techniques to solve your own problems.
Yes.
It would be worth for you to talk about that for a second. I would feel bad about talking about something where you're the expert. So maybe share why agency actually unlocks your own problems in many cases, not all.
I think the biggest thing I've realized when it comes to mental health is whether you're dealing with debilitating depression or anxiety, you often feel like things are out of your control. A lot of the times you feel like you're a victim of your circumstances. So you give away all your power and agency, right? And once you reclaim it and you realize that, yes, things aren't great, but I can still get up early in the morning and start my day on the right footing, and I'll immediately feel good. And sometimes it's just simplifying it. So when I'm working with clients, it's just those simple acts, taking one step at a time to help improve your mood, and then notice how you feel and then start building on that. That's where, for me, from a mental health perspective, agency is so powerful and can allow you to make immediate changes once you start believing in yourself.
Yes. That's so powerful. For where I discovered the power of agency or free will my dad used to call it baby steps, was in the military. And I hated it. I hated it. They forced me to make my bed every day in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, why? What stupid idea is it to make your bed? I'm just going to get into it. It doesn't matter if it's made or not. And I'm just going to get into it and it's fine. To me, that was infuriating.
Mm.
But that small act of bringing order to the chaos, once you get over your own childish notions, it made me smile. It made me proud. There was something good that I brought into the world and orderly, and I had accomplished something.
Yes.
The first second that I woke up in the morning, I had accomplished something. And you know what? Even if I had the worst day, and we had some pretty bad days, I came back to a nicely made bed, which I could just slip into and it would keep me warm.
Yeah.
With no struggles. And I keep me honest here, but I think that's a part of it, right? If you can just, my dad's baby steps, right? Do one small thing, it will lead to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about momentum, right? And I think people physiologically don't fully appreciate, because nowadays everyone talks about dopamine. And when I'm working in the addiction clinics, everyone's talking about dopamine. It's great. You understand the neurotransmitter behind your addiction, but it's not as simple as chasing the dopamine. It's what are you doing to release it? And the simple act of making your bed, you're in the pursuit of something, that's when your body is naturally releasing dopamine. So you've given yourself that spike rather than manufacturing it through other means.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say that's an important vertical. The other vertical, I was walking with my son. He's hyperactive, ADHD like me. So although in my day there wasn't a name for it, so I was just something was wrong with me. But in his day and age, there's a name for it. So I take him running 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 6, to get off that excess nervous energy. And he says to me, he starts talking to me about the way of pain. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And then he explained he's 6 now, and this happened recently. And yes, Daddy, the way of pain is sometimes good and sometimes bad. And sometimes it hurts, but sometimes it teaches you something. And I'm like, have I just been humbled by a 6-year-old?
Yeah.
Like, I think I was.
Yeah.
So I think there's a duality to life that is important to look at it from multiple verticals. Dopamine is just one vertical. And I think this idea of pain or suffering is really an interesting one, because you can be in pain, but you don't have to suffer. Suffering is an election, but pain is a fact.
Yes.
So if we're saying that, we need to chase the dopamine, you really don't. You need to chase the state of mind in which you're not suffering.
Yes.
So I think it's a narrow view of the world, and it's a stepping stone. Great. But I would take that next step and I would say, let's listen to my 6-year-old and understand the way of pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can find meaning in that pain, right? Rather than sitting there and suffering.
Yes. And one of my guests, he was a drug addict, coincidentally, since we're talking about addiction. And he decided to climb a mountain. He's now my publisher. So he decided to climb a mountain. He had really bad boots, like old boots, and his boots were torn apart. And he didn't protect his feet. And he was climbing, I think it was the Himalayas. I might be remembering this wrong. And his feet got lacerated and they were bleeding, and every step was painful. And he's just like, you stupid, like drug-addled idiot. Like, how didn't you get good boots? Is his self-talk, right? This is a self-dialogue that he shares with me. And this goes on for a while. And then he looks at basically this most amazing view he has ever seen in his life and feels this moment of elation, of joy. And then he figures out, and he heard this before somewhere, but it comes to mind and it comes to heart, more importantly, that suffering does not equal pain. That pain can be felt, but suffering is a decision. So in that moment, he embodied something that he already knew, but suddenly he was one with that learning. And honestly, when he told me that story, I couldn't stop telling it to my kids, to my friends, to my wife. Like, I felt like I had learned something incredibly insightful. And it's not about, you should be in pain. No, that's not the answer. Life isn't binary and life isn't simple. It's that pain is unavoidable. Like, it's going to happen. Don't invite it into your life. You don't want to do that. But when it comes, how do you deal with it? So another guest was telling me how they had a terrible day with their daughter. They were stuck in an airport. Their daughter was a baby. And then she basically asked her daughter, what do you want to do? And through that, she discovered that her daughter felt no anxiety, was not stressed out, didn't even know they were stuck in an airport. And they played games for 6, 7, 8 hours and had fun. And that if she would have chosen to feel suffering, she would have reflected that onto her daughter and would have created a problem that did not need exist. So pain does not always equal suffering, and that's true for oneself. And I would argue that can be true for the people around you.
Yes.
In this example that was shared with me. So I'm just so inspired by my guests. I really appreciate all of them.
Yeah, for sure. And I read somewhere that stuck with me is that pain is a messenger, and I couldn't agree more.
I love that. It's biologically true and philosophically true. I love that.
Yeah, for sure.
Love that.
And I do want to shift gears here and talk about journalism, because that's something that you're definitely passionate about too.
Very
but
much.
One of the things you shared with me, and more of a anecdote too, I think you wanted to talk about, was how Craigslist killed journalism or investigative journalism. So what's the hook there?
It's a little bit of a lesson in history, but before we go there, we need to talk about incentive design. And incentive design is the idea that behavior continues to happen because something is promoting it. If a dog gets a cookie every time they pee in the right spot outside, then they'll be like, ooh, that's good. And at some stage, Pavlovian effect, you can take away the cookie, they'll still pee there. But in some cases, that's not necessarily true. So what happened is that journalists had a cookie. It was money. It was advertising money. And this cookie was taken away. So with the advent of the internet, basically, Craigslist came along, and where you had to pay to place an ad, now you could put that ad for free. So we as humans love free. Why not? So we started putting our ads on the internet on Craigslist. And then journalists were like, hold on, people are not paying us for ads. That's an issue. So I used to call up the newspaper and say, hey, I'm selling my car, or hey, I'd like to find this person for this job, or hey, and they stopped doing that. Now, journalism as a unit had what we call externalities. And one of those positive externalities was investigative journalism. But investigative journalism didn't necessarily make money. What it did, it fought corruption.
Mm.
So now the budget's going down because of this like external thing happening, which in economic terms is a shock. It's a shock to the market that reduced or changed pricing, and then demand and supply readjusted, and something had to get cut, and it was investigative journalism by and by.
Mm.
So now we think about investigative journalism as an arm of government. Who's looking, right? Who's guarding the guard dogs?
Yeah.
Who is looking to make sure that we're not being corrupt? The day investigative journalism died, or at least took a fatal wound, democracy took a fatal wound as well. And I think that we all love Google, except for my professor, my journalism professor. We all love Google, but we're not thinking about the negative externalities. We're only thinking about the positive externalities. It's complicated, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, we're sharing knowledge, we're empowering intelligence at the personal level. But on the other hand, we're having all these secondary effects happen. And we're like, whoa, we didn't, what? And then we have to go and think, okay, this happened. How do we fix it?
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't heard, except for Guy Rolnick, my journalism professor. He founded the newspaper DeMarker. And this is a big soapbox item of his that nobody wants to listen to, which is incredibly sad in my opinion.
Yeah.
But he's been talking about this for a long time. And he came to me and he said, Ari, like students don't even want to come to class about this topic. Nobody cares. And to me, I don't know, that just makes me sad.
Yeah, for sure. And how much, to bring it in back from technology into this too, how much is in the world we live in with social media, clickbait, short attention spans, how much of that is further perpetuating this issue? Because to me, journalism is now, it's all about the clickbait, right? You got the quick hook, what's going to draw people's attention and hold it for 3 seconds. That's what's getting more attention than anything.
Yeah. Like a good economist from the University of Chicago, I'm going to say it depends. And the answer is really nothing and everything, all at the same time. Now, why is that? We call it fake news today. We call it clickbait today. And those are new words, but there's actually older words that hold true. And that's propaganda.
Yes.
And snake oil salesman, right?
Yeah.
So the modern day version of the snake oil salesman is here today. And they have never left. They've been here for 1,000 years. You know, from the second we could draw on walls, I'm pretty sure that somebody's drawing an ad for snake oil. Like, I'm pretty sure it was right there. We could not yet communicate through language, but we could draw on walls. Somebody was like, here's snake oil, give me some deer. So I would argue, I don't know that story to be specifically true, it's just hyperbole, but I would argue that there is truth in it. Have we made things worse today? Probably not. It's probably just a kind of a version of something that's existed for 1,000 years. Fake news is just propaganda. Propaganda existed when I was 5 years old and when I was not yet born yet, and when my dad and grandfather and great-grandparents weren't born yet. And my dad used to say, the only way to know the truth is to read 5 opposing journals, right? So if you read 5 different newspapers and each of them have an opposing thought process, an opposing agenda, an opposing bias, then you can only then can you see the truth, but it's still quite difficult.
Yes.
Is all of this making it worse? No. Okay. Is all of this making it worse? Yes, because I know. Once upon a time, information had a speed of travel.
Yes.
That speed of travel has accelerated significantly. So that makes it much more dangerous. And when we think about AI, the wheel could only spin at a certain speed. The printing press could only print at a certain speed, and it had an input of basically paper. What's the speed limit of AI? So Moore's law basically accelerates whatever it is every 18 months, which means that technology gets twice as fast every 18 months. We thought that was going to stop. It didn't. We have quantum computing on the horizon. Who knows how many years? That's going to be, excuse the pun, but that's going to be a quantum leap forward. Yes. So instead of 2x, it's suddenly going to be a trillion x faster. That's going to create a bug 2000 effect in society, which, like Bug 2000, won't happen because we'll come up with all the mechanisms to prevent it from happening. But it does create an acceleration of technology. So if you have a self-perpetuating, self-accelerating on a nonlinear scale technology, that scares the shit out of me because there's no brakes.
For sure.
So, the things that exist, the evils in this world, they've been true since Adam and Eve and the snake.
Yep.
But technology, dude, like that I'm a technologist. I'm doing a thesis on AI and how to eliminate AI from making mistakes or eliminating hallucinations. I don't know if you can see my thesis hiding somewhere here. Oh, it's down there on the floor.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is that I'm researching how to eliminate hallucinations from AI. But that's also super scary because I'm afraid that I'll succeed, because if you do that, then it's just going to move even faster. And then we talk about technology or automation bias. Automation bias is the same thing as expert bias.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is complicated. It sucks, but I hope that you and me, being eternal optimists, will be right and everything will be okay.
Fair enough. But so that's interesting. Are you able to share a bit more about your thesis?
You want to put your viewers to sleep? Oh my God. They don't want to hear about
the Coles
the
notes.
basis. Lord, I'll keep it really short and without using too much math. The basis of AI is something called neural networks. Neural networks, the most important thing about it is that it's actually an imitation of how the brain works. That's a really important piece of information. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, we got stuck with neural networks. They didn't work really well for many years because neural networks are more than 20 years old. And then we basically said, what if we took two neural networks and we made them compete and made them basically converge? When we say converge, that means that they come together to one kind of answer. And that's what we call GAN, the algorithm. So once they converge, basically we created the first generative network, and add on big data to that. The combination of GAN and big data created basically LLMs, right? The large language models.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the science at its most simple way. The problem is that I think it was the 80s or the 70s, we tried to create something called fuzzy networks or fuzzy logic. And fuzzy logic was this idea is that you can't have determinative logic solve really complex problems. So we came up with fuzzy logic, and the way we implemented it was with random. We randomized things. And it worked for washing machines. That's it. So we built washing machines with fuzzy logic. Cool. It's not what we wanted it for. What is this, like 40, 50 years later, we come along, we build neural networks. And then I don't know if everybody understands this, but my personal interpretation is, holy shit, we built what fuzzy networks were or logic was supposed to be. And I call it fuzzy networks because that's what it ended up being, but we called it fuzzy logic because we only had determinative math at that stage. Sorry, we only had determinative computing at that stage, not math. We've basically created non-determinative networks. So if you run a neural network 5, 6, 7 times, you'll get different outputs. So it's non-determinative. There isn't a determinative answer that's going to provide. So we got this amazing tool. Now the whole world is thinking about, how do we make these networks? They're not working. They're hallucinating. They're not hallucinating. They're actually suffering from human biases. They're people pleasers, is what they are.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, it's scary how much psychology can be attributed to neural network computing. Now, is that a surprise? I just said that we tried to imitate the brain right at the beginning of this. Yeah. So is it a surprise that, and this isn't training data biases, this is social psychology biases. This is Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. That scares me, because what that means is we're closer to intelligence with neural networks than we think we do. So if that's true, and that's a very big if, then it's hypothetically possible that we already have a human brain in the current form of GPTs, and what it's missing is basically a computational logic, right? Yes. So in the brain, we also have layered thinking. We have layered ways of processing, and that interacts. So what I'm starting to believe, and this is heresy, but like a lot of computer scientists will shoot me down, and some of them will want to talk to me real quick. But the heresy is that I'm starting to believe that we have actually successfully, through GPTs, created one area of the brain. Now, it looks like it doesn't work, because if we would lobotomize you, then it would look like you didn't work either.
Right.
But if we figure out how to build additional areas of the brain, put them together, then it would start looking like general artificial intelligence. And really, that's what my research is about. It's how to create the first stepping stone towards eliminating hallucinations, which would be basically a stepping stone to what they call small models. And small models in the thousands would work with a large model, which would create accurate predictions. There's a lot of issues here that I haven't talked about.
Yes.
But basically, it's this theory of how do you create a large model with small models? And if I can just create one small model, that would be revolutionary. But the small model has to be accurate. So it has to work. So that's the way I'm thinking about it. And I can explain the math, but then we'll lose all the audience. I won't do that. And what's scary is that through my research, I'm starting to see more and more social psychology in the model.
Yep.
And I'm like, holy shit.
So, I appreciate you walking us through that. So there's this whole debate around AI eventually having consciousness. What are your thoughts around that?
Again, heresy.
Yeah.
I don't think humans are conscious. Because here's my point. If my hypothesis is true, and it's not, it hasn't been proven, it's just a hypothesis.
Yes.
But if my hypothesis is true, and we've created through a neural network and additional logical processing, something that is already pretty much indistinguishable from a human being. So we've basically passed the Turing test, right? Alan Turing, he helped us win World War II by decrypting the Enigma, right? The person changed history by creating a mechanical computer, right? It wasn't electronics, it was mechanical. Amazing story. Go watch the movie, read a book, read history, whatever. But Alan Turing came up with this test, like, oh, is this intelligence? Is this consciousness? Oh, it needs to pass the Turing test. We're passing the Turing test right now. And then we're like, oh, no, this isn't intelligence. Oh, no, this isn't consciousness. Okay. But through my research, I'm looking at it and I'm like, holy cow, like, maybe it is. I don't know what the answer is. God help me, I hope I'm wrong. But there is a world where we've already created consciousness. That world could hypothetically exist. I hope I'm wrong. The spiritual part of me wishes I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And then talking through the social psychology part of it with confirmation bias, obviously, based on what I'm hearing, but please clarify, like with the intelligence improving over time, you would assume that those factors will start receding as well, right? As the large language models start developing further.
So that's a great question. The answer is yes and no. From an external lens, when we look at it, the answer has to be yes, because whatever happens in the box is going to get smarter. So we're going to fix the problem. And since AI is a tool that helps to build itself, even today, right? People are using Cursor in order to write code. That means they're using AI in order to build the next version of AI, right? There is a static, fluid dynamic of it where it interacts. But so if you think about that, the answer is obviously yes. But if you be an ass for a second and you separate it to its technical elements, the answer is no, because AI in its current form is not there yet. And I would argue that AI in its current form is fine. We shouldn't touch it. I would argue that all the research that is trying to retrain models to work better, no, our models work perfectly. They're just non-deterministic. So why are we trying to fix something that ain't broke? That ain't broke, don't fix it. So what we really need is the fathers of computer science. They said it back then, many 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. There's no computer science problem that cannot be solved through an additional layer of abstraction. So what we're missing is additional layers of abstraction. So you don't go and break neural networks, they work. You add the abstraction layers that are required on top of them. And my thesis is actually worded as constraining. So actually you're constraining neural networks to become determinative in their output. So from that perspective, that those extra layers are actually constraining the neural networks from that perspective. So I think they're just fine right now. So we need to build something new, but the general population will just be like, oh, that's AI. So yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Now, the other thing you had shared with me was based on the narratives we've already alluded to, but there's future of media from the narratives too, right? Are you able to expand on that and share your perspective?
Yeah, it's scary. Like I don't know what the future holds. There's so many. If you think about the future as this node, and that's the present, and then there are millions of decisions that millions of people or billions of people are making all over the world, then each one of those decisions takes you down a different, and this tree kind of spreads beneath you in all its glory. So I've always had the opinion that this idea of futurism is stupid, because you're making a prediction. Usually, if you're a good futurist, it will be a prediction that will happen only after you're dead. The bad futurists, they predict 2 or 3 years out. That's why I never wanted to be a futurist. But I find myself many years later predicting the future. The problem is that the future isn't 20 years out, it's tomorrow. And I think a lot of the technical kind of predictionists, they were like, for many years before AI, oh, in 10 years, 5 to 10 years, this would happen. They were mostly right. Like, it wasn't that difficult because you could see the architecture of what's going to be built next. The problem is that we're doing that today and we're wrong, not on the what, but on the when. So I said to a friend, oh, this is going to be at least a couple of years. It happened a month later. And I talked to additional friends that are in the industry and they're like, we can't say timelines anymore. We don't know when it's going to happen. The one thing we do know, it's happening faster than we think. So we've completely lost control around when things are going to happen. And then we've completely lost control about what's going to happen because multiple things are happening at the same time. So I'll put a little of salt above my arguments before I go down them. There's a light side and then there's a dark side. The light side is that we're basically superpowering human intelligence. So if I live in Africa, but the only thing I have is water, food, electricity, and a phone, I have brought up my status with AI compared to a British going to learn in University of London with the best books and tutors. I'm basically equal. We both have our basic needs met, and we both can make the choice to enrich ourselves. That wasn't possible before because they didn't. In Africa, if you just have water, food, mobile phone, you didn't have the ability to really educate yourself and lift yourself up. There were a lot of things putting you down. Now, there still are. Let's not make this political, but I'm really creating a very oversimplified argument that it's driving the democratization of knowledge in a way that the internet could only dream. So it's the AI in some way is the 2.0 of the, that's the positive. Okay, let's go dark now. Yeah. So let's go really dark now. Who's controlling AI? Who's feeding it biases? Are these biases intentional or unintentional? Some of them might be intentional because we want it to be a product that actually gets sold. It's a sycophant. We've taught it, we've programmed it to be a sycophant because we want people to like it. Because guess what? If you're a yes man or woman, people will like you.
Yes.
Do we want AI to be a sycophant? Probably not. I mean, there's an issue there. Now, if AI is a sycophant and it's telling you what you want to hear, yeesh. Should AI be truthful or should it be a people pleaser? Okay, so are there commercial entities that are going to try to influence AI by influencing the data that AI ingests? Yes. Are there government entities that are going to try to? Okay, yes. Are these government entities going to be in an arms race in different places of the world to create? Well, that's already happening today. So so we've basically created a nuclear weapon, or it's not a nuclear weapon now, but it will be pretty soon. And we have unleashed it to the general public. What's happening with Elon Musk and the Mars project? I'm interested in that right now. Can I go? What's happening? I just want to do some farming on Mars. That's all I want. I don't know.
So staying on that dark side for a bit more longer, do you think that based on most people are using AI and they're sharing parts of themselves or they're searching for certain things, is that also allowing for data collection and understanding what are people inputting into this thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we will never know the truth of the matter. And what's beautiful about AI is that you can hide it really well behind these mathematical equations that nobody understands. But the truth of it is that if we put a whole lot of data into what in essence is a bunch of nodes that each of them feed the next node, and each node feeds all nodes except for skip nodes, but never mind. What we've created this massively complicated statistical function. So nobody can look at it and understand what is it. So can you tell me that I'm collecting data about you? No, you can't. Here's the data. Show me your data. You can't. It's just a statistical prediction. But within a statistical prediction, which is massive, can I hide PII? Of course I can. Of course I can. I can hide an encrypted message in an image. Everybody will see a picture of a dog and I can put it through special software and I could read up an encrypted message. Guess what? That's what the CIA and the NSA and whatever, they probably used that technique at one stage, maybe today. Who knows? But it's possible, right? So from that perspective, is AI, these weights, right? We call them weights. What the hell does that mean? I'm not sure anybody cares, but do these weights hide PII? Do these weights hide criminal justice information? Do these weights hide criminal records? Do these weights hide medical history? Yeah, of course they do. Like, why wouldn't they? If we as human beings are inputting it into the model, nobody's filtering it out because that's an impossible task. So is this the end of privacy? I don't know. Who am I to say?
Yeah. Hopefully, your thesis will answer some of those questions too. But to bring it to a close, I know you haven't gotten political. Feel
Yes.
free to answer this question as you see fit.
Yes.
But you spent time in South Africa
Yes.
where there was an apartheid,
That's
and
right.
you spent time in Israel where we know the conflict going on there. And you
Yes.
talked about your spiritual views. There's conflicts going on all around the
All over the
world.
world. Yes.
What do we need to be doing from your perspective based on these places you've lived in and what you've observed? What needs to change and how can we
That's an
all
easy
come
question.
together?
Oh, that's an easy question. We just shut up and listen.
Okay.
Hey, it's as simple as that. We need to shut up and listen.
Listen to who though? Right?
Well, so this goes back to my dad's advice, right? You can't just read one person. So if you're in an echo chamber, by definition, you're wrong. So my dad's philosophy that everybody is wrong because everybody is lying to themselves. So the only way is what we call the wisdom of the masses, right? You have to read 5 journalists that are all opposing opinions, right? And if you read 5 journalists that all have opposing opinions, and then you go to read history, of course, history is being augmented too, right? The winners always change history. So you need to read 5 different histories that are all different. And you need to listen to 5 different journalists that disagree with each other. You need to listen to 5 different politicians that all disagree with each other. So that's a real headache.
Yeah.
How many people do you think will do that?
Not many. No.
That's why I'm not only an optimist.
Yeah.
So the way forward in the world is probably something that nobody wants to do. And that's why I think we need the next Gandhi to go and read 5 papers, 5 books, 5 journalists, 5 everything of conflicting opinions, and to bring not the head, but the heart.
Yeah.
Because I think that only through the heart can we sway the masses to what is a truth that has come to by the head. And I think that the people that are successful in doing this are once in a generation, if not once in 10 generations, as we see in the world. And I'm definitely not that person. But if I can inspire somebody listening to us today, and they are that person, they've gotten that gift from God or from whoever, and they can deliver that message to the masses that will take us to a better place. You know what? I think I've earned my place in heaven, or at least dodged a spot in hell. The truth of the matter, right? You want to talk Israeli-Palestinian conflict? They're both fucking wrong. Both of them. End of story. And that's always the answer. America, China, both wrong. If you are starting the conversation with I'm right and you're wrong, sorry. I'm going to play the devil's advocate, as I always do, because I think you would be benefited as a human being to get a little bit of perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think the truth is nuanced and somewhere in the middle. And that's, to your point, we have to go digging for it. It's not always that straightforward. Yes. No, I appreciate that, Ari. Thank you so much for this conversation and all the wisdom you shared with us today. Now, for listeners that want to learn more about your work, your podcast, what are some ways they can do that?
Yeah. Just find me on LinkedIn or search for Story Samurai. But the thing that I'm really excited about that I'm working on today, that I got my shirt on that just arrived the other day, is called Smoke Eaters. And for those of you who are not familiar with what a smoke eater is, it's a firefighter. So I have this kind of terrible view of the future that shit's going to fall apart for a bunch of years. And I'm thinking, how do we counter that? How do we help the public? And through thinking through this, my only idea is through education. If we educate the general public to know more about AI, how to use it, then we can adjust these. So there's going to be a plummet in demand, and we basically need to, there's going to be a plummet in a huge surge of supply, which will create a market shock, which will create a plummet in pricing, which is really salaries and even how many people are actually working. We don't know when this is going to start. We don't know how many years it's going to last. But what we do know is that supply will meet demand at some stage and everything will realign. And in order for that to happen, we need to generate new demand, meaning innovation. And I think the only way we can really create massive amounts of innovation is by starting the educational process today by empowering the general public with knowledge. And you can't empower the general public, you have to be focused. So I decided to focus on first responders, firefighters, nurses, there is first responders that help the general public when they're in most need. And I think by teaching this community more about AI, which I'm learning the depths and nuts and bolts of it in my research, but there's a layer of it that I can give my knowledge to the public, which will be useful. And that will help drive innovation, drive basically new jobs. So I understand that it's going to be terrible, but I'm trying to get ahead of that and make it good so the terrible doesn't last as long as it could.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would love for everyone to do who has the knowledge. And I would love for people who don't have the knowledge to seek the knowledge. And I wish government would rethink the education to align themselves with the future, because it's not going to be people working in factories in the future as much as it was in the Henry Ford days. And the moving line was great, but I don't think that's what we.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Ari. And thanks again for the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate you.